Hello, hello, my beloved waking gods and goddesses. Welcome to Love, Truth, and Beauty. Maria West here, and this is episode 405 and my 20th installment of my series, Conversations with Women. And today I have one of my sweet soul sisters with me, Ash Ritter, who is an ethnobotanist. She is a lover and a scholar of the flora, the fauna, the funga, and all of the things in between, seen and unseen. Ash, welcome, welcome, welcome. How's it going?
Thanks, my friend. It's good. It's a windy day. The winds of change are about us here in the
Oh,
in the desert.
indeed. Where are you? Where are you these days? I know you're in Arizona.
Mhm.
Both of us, we left California
That's right.
for the Southwest.
That's right.
Yay!
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I needed to say F people. I want to deal with rocks,
Indeed.
to
Yeah,
a certain extent. I'm in southern Arizona in the Sonoran Desert. So,
beautiful.
yeah, surrounded by the saguaros.
Yay! One of
Hmm
my favorites. I love the
hmm
drive when you come into that area. It's like we just drove out to Mesa, and there's that one highway where all of a sudden, that's all you see
Mm.
are the familiar landscapes of the big cactus, the giant cactus that I often want to just run up to and hug, but I know
Yes.
better.
Well,
It could be fun.
acupuncture.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. So it has been a few years since we were last together when you were living in Tucson and I was visiting.
Mhm.
Um, and I know a lot has happened for you. A lot of amazing things have happened for you. And as I was saying, every time I'm out on a hike, I'll see something that will spark, hey, I wonder what Ash is up to. What
Oh.
would Ash think about this? What is
Uh-huh.
happening? Let's just catch up while we're at this.
Sheesh, I'm still trying to figure out what the heck is happening. Honestly, I'm just in like sort of this deep, strange inquiry. Like, I'll put it like this, and I know you'll understand. I've only had one astrology reading in my life because I'm sensitive about who I show my shit to.
Oh,
And
indeed.
And the guy said, I can't tell if you're a Dakini or a nun. And I was like, exactly. Like, and yeah, so
Yes,
I'm
all of
kind
the
of,
above.
yeah, I'm like out here in my hermitage doing, I mean, just a hell of a lot of inner work, but writing a lot and sort of observing observing creation, observing sort of the societal theatrics and
Mhm.
distilling that in through my lens of my love of plants, my love of fungi, my love of, being a history nerd, distilling that through and trying to have these big conversations under the guise of ethnobotany and herbalism. So,
Mhm.
just philosopher Ash in her little cave doing her best over here. But yeah,
And
there's a
doing
lot going on.
amazing, amazing, amazing work. You
Thank
know,
you. Thank
um,
you.
I love your newsletters and your announcements
Thanks.
because it seems to coincide with a
Mm,
lot of things that are going on in the matrix. And I know
yeah.
you and I, we waltz in and out of it because
Yeah.
you have to interface with the matrix. It's got all the physical things, but we don't have to be identified by it. And particularly with all of the changes happening with,
Mm,
the new administration, love him or hate him, whatever, it doesn't matter because the realities are being shifted. And
that's it.
um, as I was saying earlier, I think it's very interesting that the push to nature, well, not the push, the return to nature
Mm,
and the choice to allow nature to be at the forefront rather than this artificial pharma that wants to hijack everything and call itself natural and plant-based. I'm
hmm
seeing these adverts and I'm just like horrified. It's like, wow, they're just gonna lie. They're just gonna
That's right.
lie to you. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important for people like you who do such intense work and scholarly work, not just scholarly, but also practical work to be able to educate with your classes, with your seminars, with your fun products, and just everything that you're all about. And it's been really a pleasure to witness you grow your platform
Thank
into
you.
this. I mean, it's huge. It's awesome.
Thank you kindly. It's I still feel like just a little underground critter, but
Hmm.
I think because of the nature of the changing tides and, all the versions of the changing tides at once, um, my tinfoil hat has been tossed off. So now everyone's like, we need you. We need your
Yes.
your data.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay, well, I've been waiting. That's all right. I won't take it personally. I've been waiting for you, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's true. And I don't usually talk about this often out loud, but since we've known each other for 20 years and we're,
Indeed.
uh, there's a huge amount of subtext in what I do, and not everyone catches it, and that's kind of the point, and that's sort of the secret poet nature
Hmm.
of the work that I do. In For example, in 2020, I had this really strong impulse to start lecturing more on so-called poison herbs and so-called poison mushrooms. And part of the hidden dimension to that was inviting people into a conversation around critical thinking and what do they perceive of as poison and what do they perceive of
Beautiful.
as medicine and how do they make those judgment calls? Who do they assign authority to in regards to these plants? And when
Hmm.
we can think
Yeah.
about it about Datura, when we can think about it
Yes.
about Amanita muscaria, then all of a sudden maybe there's that little sprinkle for someone where now they're thinking about, wait, who have I given authority to decide what's medicine for me? Who
Yes.
have I given authority to decide who and how and what I want to interface with and put in on around my body and my community and in the earth itself, the sky, all the things. So yeah, it's been
How
a
did that
fascinating time.
conversation begin for you? Was there
Mm.
something specific that it really just kind of called to you that this is my calling here?
Oh God. I mean, it's a long ass story, but and this is where I'll joke with people like I've been in love with herbs since I've been in the womb. My mom always tells me she was obsessed with fresh squeezed orange juice and had to have it while I was in her belly. So I'm like, okay, my first my first plant was citrus, but it's always been there.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
always been a place of solace for me. And like I grew up in a funky little beach community where, you know, I feel like thank God I grew up in the 80s where I was allowed to just run wild and go to the beach as a little kid and just stare at the sea, at this thing that could immediately engulf me and caress me at the same time. So there's this sort of epic reverence that's been built in to nature for a long
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Um, but no, it was as a teenager. As a teenager, consciously, I started feeling very fractured from um, the societal narrative and how all of that looked. And I also
Yes.
was a super like smarty kid, feeling like I was in the most dumbed down school system, and I was bored as all hell. So I
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
smoking a bunch of weed and skipping school and going to hang out at bookstores and like
Cool.
studying,
Yay!
actually studying. But the more that I felt sort of this sense of uh, this rift between
Right.
who the hell am I and what am I implanted in the societal construct. Um, I started studying rites of passage and initiation throughout different cultures all over the world, and I was really fascinated by how people make sense of who they are and how they are in community, how they even figure out what is this? What are we? What is reality in itself? So
Hmm.
as I started studying rites of passage, initiations, plants and fungi, especially psychedelic or psychoactive plants and fungi, are very deeply intertwined. So that's really where I started studying. And in part, it was to make sense of what the heck, what am I doing here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in
Why
part,
are
it
we
was
here?
just fascinating as heck, So that's really where my study of plants and fungi began. Um, More so than, clinical herbalism and all these
Hmm.
other things
Hmm.
that I can do and I love doing.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, yeah, there's a lot, lots of stories.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so much. So
Mm,
let's fast forward to 2020 when,
okay.
you
Oh,
know,
yes.
yeah, because by that
Oh, yes.
time you had already had your training, you'd been immersed, you were expanding, and then boom, this craziness that is even crazier than we could have possibly imagined
Oh, yeah.
occurred.
Oh, well, yes. Like,
How
Jesus
did
Christ,
that
where
land for? I know. I mean, it's like it is astonishing, really.
it's astonishing. I mean, what I was witnessing in part, just as an observer, as an observer of the scene, was so many people having their very first existential crisis of what does it mean if the society crumbles? What does it mean if I die or the people I love die? What does it mean if I'm not safe in this bubble that I've been
Mhm.
told that I'm safe in?
Yeah.
And so people were butting up against all of these core fears, death,
Yeah.
safety, all the
Yeah.
things. So in one sense, it was really fascinating for me to watch and just sort of pat people on the shoulder and say, like, there, we have tools for that, no worries. But at the same time, there was this absolutely intense divide and conquer divisiveness
Yeah.
program being run. And living in the Wild West, to me, is kind of part of the excitement is the volatility between worldviews, the volatility
Hmm.
between whatever.
Yes.
It's built into the soil of this land. It's
Yeah.
been volatile for a long time. So, um,
That's a good point.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I do. I
and
do.
thank God for that perspective, because I feel like people that do live in these sort of coastal bubbles have no idea what the hell is going on
No,
outside
they
of this
don't.
one story. So yeah, 2020 rolled around. And I basically kind of like I was just like, put my, tools slash weapons on my hip and was like, let's go.
Yeah.
Um, and at the time I was working for myself, but then part-time in a public apothecary. And the shit show that I was witnessing in that public apothecary was so overwhelming that it drove me personally to be like, you know what? However this crumbling is going to happen, I'm going to just make all of my dreams come true. I'm going to make every dream I have come true. Like F all of this noise. Like let's figure this shit out. So
Yeah.
I became completely self-employed, thrived way better than I ever was working as an employee for someone. Like why the
Yeah.
hell did I wait so long, right? But through that process, it drove me to really face my fears around being seen and being on the grid and all this stuff and just share what I know and share what I love, which is that we are indeed held by a web of intelligence known as nature, and we are nature. We are it. And if we so choose, we can evolve towards that path, right?
Yes.
Or if we so choose, we can fold into the singularity in a different way
Yeah.
and evolve or devolve, however you want to see it, through a different version. And this is part of what brought me to the Southwest in the first place, was hearing the story of one of the prophecy petroglyph walls up in northern Arizona,
Hmm.
showing the timeline split right now. or, in 20,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
that era, 2020, the time I split. So I said, okay, here I am. Like, let's talk about this. Um, so anyway, my mind's going in a few different
No,
directions at once,
this is
but
it's perfect. It's
yeah.
perfect because this is the language
Mm,
that we need to speak
mm,
in order to, I think part of what you and I are doing is we are triggering muscle memory of the divine spirit
mm,
within humans. And that diversion, the timeline split is, there's Musk's singularity, or is there's the rejoining of the our original state, original creative state.
mm.
And a lot of people, when you talk that way, I know when I bring it up, you can see the eyes glaze over because the requirement to even hear those words is for you to like really hit that core within the true heart, the
Mhm,
first eye, and
mm,
realize something is majorly fucked up here.
mm. Well, and to me, it's no surprise. Like sometimes I'll translate it in this way for folks that maybe that sounds too woo or that sounds too
Hmm.
esoteric for them, is I'll translate it in this way. I'll say, isn't it interesting that around the time of the pandemonium era, 20 starting in 2020, was sort of the trending of talking about the microbiome, the trending of talking about, oh, you've got to rejuvenate your gut flora, right? This conversation that
Yes.
essentially is about we actually want to welcome in other life forms
Hmm.
into this matrix known as my body
Yes.
and coexist with them in a way that is fruitful and beneficial for all.
Yes. It's a
And
win-win.
actually, and that is something that I will say we could utilize the term of modern day technology and say that organic intelligence of having a healthy microbiome is in fact creating a sort of algorithm to run in our system that effectively produces neurotransmitters that make us happier, healthier, and more in a state of intimacy and connection with the land because we're eating the land and the
Yeah.
critters of the
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
So I'm
Beautiful.
like, that's an algorithm, right? And it's like, which
Awesome.
one do you want to run?
Yeah.
Whose do you want to run?
Yeah.
Or
That's
be or
a
be run
fabulous
by,
way of
you know?
of uh of discussing it because it's relatable.
Yes.
It's relatable. I mean,
Yeah.
I know so many people that are constantly asking me,
Mm.
well, let's talk about gut health.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. And yet, the conversation about gut health is really it's more practiced because it is more practical. We eat, and there is a response, an immediate response to what it is that we eat.
Hmm.
And especially with all of the food allergies, the food disconnections, the emotional disconnections, or the emotional connections between food indigestion, skin eruptions, unwellness in general,
Yep.
not to mention the emotional aspect of what it is that we ingest and why we do certain things.
Hmm.
And why some of us got vaxxed and why many of us did not. So,
Hmm.
and then the outflow of that, because there's so much contradictory information out there about what it is that we need to do to step forward after the fact. How does it all fit?
Good questions.
Yeah, yeah. And so I
Good
know
questions.
these are topics that you are tackling in your
Hmm.
classes, in your interactions with the plant and the fungi and all of it. And so I love that you talk about being a this poet in essence, because it is a divine language of many disciplines that um, you are receiving from and putting
Mm.
it all together because I see you as this kind of mad professora sometimes, when
Yes,
you
yes.
have all these different elements and they somehow come together
They
in
do.
a way that is not just pertinent and relatable, but extremely potent in healing the divide
Mm,
because we are so polarized in so many ways that divide
mm.
and conquer permeates almost every moment of human existence
Yep.
in this modern time.
Big time. Big time. And it's so easy for people to cast something out there. I mean, even kind of in the way that we so compartmentalize our perception of education, of
Mhm.
science, of, somebody goes, you got to go to the leg doctor here, the heart doctor here, the hair
Yes.
doctor, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And no one's talking to each
No one's
other.
talking.
And that's kind of that in itself is a poem about how we perceive reality. And we could take that all the way back. We could take that
Yes.
back to Descartes. We could take that back all to these philosophers that said, the human is a clock or the human is a machine, right? We
Yeah.
could take that back to the Vatican. We could take that back to the papal bulls, that divorced certain people of their personhood, certain mountains of their personhood, right? We could take it back far into trying to understand why we are so compartmentalized, why
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
made to be sort of this in this assembly line
Yeah. Yeah.
consciousness. Um,
And it
yes.
it feels to me, and I know this as a trauma facilitator of so many years,
Mm,
that what I discovered was the reason that the work is not integrated so
mm,
that the whole human is addressed
mm,
rather than in these little bits and pieces is because if it was addressed wholly, true healing would take place.
mm,
And I always see the powers that want to be that are running, that created this matrix and running it as they need to feed on us. We don't need to feed on them. We can actually be restored to our original divine blueprint.
mhm,
And unfortunately, by their ways of dividing, conquering, and their ways of divvying up things and separating things, the wholeness can only happen if you address each and every component and bring them together because they are all related.
mhm,
So, things going on with your ear is essentially related to what's going on or what's not going on in your gut
mhm,
related to what is not happening in your heart because your brain is shutting off its natural innate intelligence. And why is that? And then we have all these technological interferences with 3G, 4G, 5G, 6G, and on and on
right,
and on
right.
that a lot of people think is bullshit,
Mhm,
which
mm,
to me, I have a partner whose house is wired with Siri and Alexa.
right.
I don't have any of that shit in my house. I got my Wi-Fi, and when I'm not using Wi-Fi, that shit is turned off. And
Mhm,
I basically have all these Faraday cages all over my house
yep.
because I'm not going to take it for granted. I'm going to actually be proactive. And, people think I'm silly, but that's part of what I need to do in order to take responsibility
Mm,
for this body, keep
mm,
it in alignment, keep it running optimally,
right.
and really protecting myself from any kind of interference or insertion. Um, it's part of my personal spiritual hygiene
That's
to
it.
up that immunity, physical, mental, emotional, energetic immunity that I think we all need to be responsible for, which is why
That's
I
right.
think herbal medicines, plant medicines,
Mm,
all of it is just so important?
Mm. I mean, this is a fascinating, we could go so many ways with this because even in sort of pulling apart the threads of what the hell is immunity
Mhm.
anyways, I think that a lot of people look at it as a purely sort of um, an extension of war, right? An
Indeed.
extension of war where it's this bad, I good, we need to battle the bad, I am not
Mhm.
safe, so I must fight. So there's that underlying
Yes.
consciousness
Yes.
around how so many people perceive health and immunity
Hmm.
or are made to perceive health and immunity, which is I am not safe and I'm going to fight. So now the interesting thing about that consciousness is why is it that so many people in this time have so-called autoimmune disorders, have so-called chronic inflammatory states going on.
Hmm.
Um, and this is for any side of the narrative coin you want to go on is
Oh, yeah.
what is this phenomenon around ultimately feeling not safe? I know I could speak for myself. I was one of those people that's
Please.
like, I can't go outside because they're freaking spraying all day. I can't drink the water because, and at a certain point,
Yes.
you'll lose your freaking marbles. And so the underlying conversation that I feel like for my own healing and also I do a lot in client work is, do you feel safe?
Hmm.
And most people say no. And I
Yeah.
say, how do we change that?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do we transform this? How do we create first and foremost a way of thinking and a way of perceiving and then ultimately a way of feeling and a way of interfacing that enhances our sense of belonging, enhances our sense of safety. And so immunity to me is so much more than white blood cells battling some critters. That's just one layer, which also is up for debate, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
the other layer being, what about creating a sense of tenderness and softness and intimacy and connection because we know that connection is very, very good for us physically,
Hmm.
physiologically, psychologically, right? These are the things that people are looking for. And these are the things that literally like release opiate like chemistry in our body and help us feel great. So yeah, immunity in itself, to me, speaks towards that reflection of really how do we interface with the world and
Hmm.
are we really on a spiritual battlefield right now? I think
Yes.
so.
I think so as
Yeah,
well.
right.
I think so as well. What are some of the common themes that you're noticing with your clients and students?
Big time autoimmune stuff.
Hmm.
Big time autoimmune stuff. A lot lately over the past couple months has been this is always the case, but it's been a sort of intense catharsis of really gnarly shadow work people are
Okay.
doing.
Okay.
Really gnarly shadow work people are doing around PTSD, old trauma stuff, or what I see sometimes and maybe support the client in seeing for themselves is ancestral baggage that was laid on them
Hmm.
that maybe isn't even theirs to begin with, right?
Indeed.
So a lot of interesting sort of ancestral purging going on. But yeah, physically, physiologically speaking, a lot of autoimmune conditions, a lot of like Epstein-Barr cytomegalovirus, which again could get into really weird territory real fast. That's maybe not like fit for YouTube, right?
Hmm. Well, we
Um,
can go there because, as you know, it's funny that you say that because I got a notice saying that if I wanted to, the one video at the time during the COVID, because I just
mm,
started my channel around that time, uh,
uh,
that they have decided to lift the ban off of it. And I'm just like going, well, Jesus, I think I deleted it. Or did you guys delete it? So it's just so
uh-huh.
strange
I
how that's
know.
coming around. But yeah, I would like to go there.
Mm,
No holds barred here. We can
mm.
handle it.
Good.
I think it's an important conversation because,
Mhm.
I know so many people are right now ready and willing to sacrifice their well-being for a pill that is
Sure.
going to quote unquote either eradicate the symptoms or make it like it never happened. And as we know, we need to holistically deal with the mind, heart, body, soul, spirit collective as a whole and not
Mhm.
eradicate symptoms because that does not root out the essential problem or the essential dysfunction.
Not everyone wants to face their demons.
Indeed. Yeah.
And that is the type of work that is asked of us when we really begin to inquire why. Why is this happening?
Hmm.
What are these symptoms? What is this language that the body is speaking,
Hmm.
expressing to me?
Hmm.
And expressing not just about my body, but about the memories I carry with me and the land that I live on, because our body is also
Hmm.
expressing our relationship to environmental toxicity, and that could be physical, and that to me very much could be psychic, right?
Hmm. Yes.
Very much.
Yeah.
So, and then one of the kind of easier ways to talk about this sort of nefarious weirdness is the question, why during the pandemonium times was ivermectin working for people? Why during the pandemonium times was Artemisia annua, Sweet Annie, working for people? Why was xanthoxylum working for people? These aren't antiviral, these are antiparasitic.
Hmm. Yes.
There's layers to this because now
Yes.
ethnobotanist Ash says, well, how do people throughout time engage with some of these compounds or
Yes.
engage with some of these plants?
Yes.
Well, there's a plant that was being worked with. I'm trying to remember where in West Africa. I think that president actually got taken out after this formula was released, in fact, but it was a nasal spray, and the nasal spray had an herb in it called xanthoxylum. I'm
Hmm.
forgetting the species, but it's related to Szechuan pepper. Okay.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing is that plant is utilized in Haiti as an anti-zombie medication.
Yes. I remember this.
We
Yeah.
thought, I think this is right when I saw you. I was
Yes.
freaking out about making that connection, right?
Yeah,
Um,
no, it is, it's intense. It's
it's
intense because the language of parasites, because
right,
in some of the work that I've done, like exorcisms, entity removal kinds of things,
right.
and I was back in the late 80s and 90s, a very strong proponent of Hulda Clark's work
Mhm.
dealing with a lot of parasites. And so the relationship that I made between the actual parasites in our bodies and our colon, the overrun is related quite often to an overrun or an entity overrun,
Right.
spiritually and psychically and energetically. So the
That's it.
relationship it's quite amazing. And
That's it.
like, oh, naughty, naughty to make those connections.
I
But
mean, and
it's
this
not a
is, yeah,
coincidence, though.
no. And this is where we could explain it away in sort of baseline, medical terminology, and we could say it's a psychospiritual issue, right?
Hmm.
It's the impact of the consciousness on the physicality of the body. We could explain it away in these terms just as much as we could explain it away in we have created an egregore demon based on believing this narrative that this thing is gonna do this, 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 and this. So
Yes,
everyone be scared. Everyone's
yes,
scared. Everyone's inflamed. Everyone's inflamed. Everyone's way more susceptible to some BS, right?
yes. Indeed, that
It's
makes
just
the inflammation go crazy and go critical. And it's
it's
like, and it's
bananas.
a mind virus because you get two people to start believing it. I mean, the yaya gaga zaza that still happens where I know people that are still wearing masks.
Mhm.
Every booster, every vax, they're for it.
Well,
And
and this, yep.
it's just so creepy because I literally have seen their consciousness and their vitality recede from their bodies. It's not good.
And this is where, as a practitioner, my role is not to tell people what to do. It's to ask really good questions and empower them to make their own decisions. So
Yeah.
oftentimes I'm just like, hey, man, choose your own adventure and understand that every choice you make has trade-offs. So you could do the trade-off of feeling more safe by influencing your body with a heavy load of heavy metals, etc. And maybe that'll make you feel more safe, but for how long and at what
Mhm.
cost,
Yeah.
right? And
It's
again, it's
not
choose your own
sustainable.
adventure. Like if you want to
Hmm.
do that, you go right ahead.
Yeah.
You know, but yes, I think ultimately it comes down to on a very real level how we perceive, how we feel about the choices, the health choices that we're making.
Hmm.
And that's even where people talk about dietary stuff and dietary dogma. I'm like, if you feel ashamed while you're eating a piece of kale, it's gonna do you no good.
It's not going to do you any good. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Indeed.
know,
Yeah.
so there are just some very interesting layers to the patterns that I see in the collective through the clinical work that I do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I will utilize different rhetoric depending on, and this is where poet ash comes in, right? Is I will utilize different rhetoric depending on the person that I'm speaking with to to make a connection, right?
Hmm.
Some people
Yeah.
don't want to talk about entities and spirit possession. They don't want to talk
Indeed.
about
They don't want to
their
know they
dead
exist.
grandpa like
Yep.
clinging on, you know? So I'm like, great, let's talk about, yeah, do you have friendly flora from your environment that you're engaging with? Like,
Hmm.
can you sleep through the night? Are you a hyper vigilant person?
Hmm.
All of these things. So I'm excited about the times we're in because ultimately I think veil gone, shadow work here. And, for those of us and I think the women and true, this true spooky nature of a woman in part is being really good at darkness technology and really
Hmm.
good at going into the original matrix, which is the womb
Yes.
work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is the most profound time to really kind of get comfortable with not knowing, to get comfortable with the darkness. And anyway, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. It
It's a lot.
really is a
Yeah, yeah,
lot.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
well, let's talk about some of the tinctures that
Mm.
you're working with lately.
Oh
You
God.
know, one of my favorite ones that we worked with, Datura. I have
Ah,
a particular fondness with the Datura and with the Brugmansias
yes,
and all of the so-called baneful plants.
that's right.
Um, s- Mostly because when I was growing up, my nanny, Magda, there was a side garden. So there was my little fairy garden, with all
Mm,
kinds of beautiful night blooming jasmine, the honeysuckle, and all these beautiful, beautiful plants that
mm,
I used to eat them. And,
uh-huh.
I didn't know. I didn't know some of them were poison and nothing bad ever happened to me or anything like that. So I have a particular relationship with the baneful plants. And I just remember I did some of my best work in really kind of wading through these veils of illusion
Yeah.
that uh, were really beckoning me to move beyond the so-called safety security nets that I had created,
Mm,
um, and move in a way where I could eh, pierce through and uplift at the same time. And so that's what I
Mm,
remember about my experience with the Datura tincture. It was
mm,
fab. And
mm,
it what it did is that it unified my astral dream world life
mm,
with the sort of waking dream of being conscious of waltzing in and out of the matrix.
mm,
Um, and it really helped with, I do group work with a bunch of people all over the world where we actually do dream work together, where we meet up on the
mm,
astral and do certain things, do certain exercises to sort of convey or survey the landscape, so to speak,
mm,
uh, of the matrix grid and, trying to map out how we can leave the grid
mm,
and go back to our original uh, un unpolluted reality. So that's been kind of fun. It just opened a lot of doors
mm.
without being high.
This is the thing. I
Yeah.
mean, this is the thing about as my brain usually does, it's going in two directions at once.
Go.
I was going to say this is the thing about the revolution being sold back to people. This is the
Hmm.
thing about sort of the medicalization and legalization of so many so-called psychedelic plants and
Hmm.
fungi, is
Hmm.
that it's being sold to get high.
Yeah.
It's being sold to make you a better worker in the system.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yet, these plants, these fungi, these intelligences, these compounds, also have the ability to bring us into coherence with some pretty fascinating data, if you want to call
Yes.
it that,
Yes.
and and ultimately bring us into coherence with these um, shall we say, ancestral memories,
Hmm.
So the baneful herbs, as we could call them, particularly the nightshades, I have a huge affinity for also. And in part, the story is about me trying to understand what were my ancestors utilizing for rites of passage
Hmm.
as plants. And like, yes, henbane, dogbane, belladonna, datura, all being in that realm. And I find it so interesting that these plants are absolutely vilified from the 1500s on by sort of the kind of larger group consciousness, vilified to no
Hmm.
end.
Oh, indeed. Indeed.
And and yet this sort of premier group of plants and compounds that influenced modern day anesthesiology and the premier group of plants that were very, very important in some of the sort of MK Ultra um, explorations. So there's
Right?
this very fascinating, you know, paradox existing in this plant family that we could call the nightshades, which
Hmm.
its Latin name is Solanaceae. So again, even in the name game, we have night and soul,
And
sun.
so, right. Yeah.
We have this ability for these plants to create a portal between the worst of the worst and the best of the best.
Yes.
And that I think is partly why I love engaging with these plant intelligences is this is the time we're in
Yeah.
where it's all stacked. It's all stacked in one. You know what I mean? We get it
Yeah, I
all. We
do.
get it all in this realm. So nightshades, Datura, I mean, of course, Datura's I'm a devotee, I feel like, to this one. She's like my boss bitch. And
And she's native. She's
that's right.
everywhere
She's
I am.
everywhere. That's right.
Everywhere I am.
Same, yeah, same. We're in Datura land.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Datura.
sheesh, I mean, and this plant, even as talking about just sort of baseline physical stuff. So first of all, to the dear listeners, don't go out eating datura. Like, do
Yes,
your due
don't.
diligence, research, study. This is a very This is to be engaged with in a very specific manner because
Mhm.
even in a lot of the ethnobotany and the traditional lore of various cultures throughout the Americas and beyond, um, it's for the darkest of sorcery and sort of nefarious stuff,
Mhm. Yeah,
and it's for like deep dream, ancestral, visionary, prophetic work.
yeah,
And
yeah,
this to me is a reflection of the same shit we're dealing with the psychedelic renaissance right now,
yeah,
so-called,
yeah.
is hey, it's being used by the so-called bad guys just as much as it's being
Oh,
used by the
oh,
good
indeed.
guys.
Oh, indeed. And you
So
have
be
to
careful.
discern. You have to discern what you are engaging, who you are engaging, what groups there are, because there's a lot of really naughty folks out there who just want your money and
Oh
don't
yeah.
care about the fallout of the consequences that are going to happen when you indulge and you're not quite educated, you're not quite ready,
Yep.
other than, ooh, the latest workshop for the workshop junkie,
Right.
um, who has a lot of disposable income. And
Right.
that's what happens under the guise of enlightenment and spirituality and ooh, the new cool experience. And these plans are not to be taken lightly.
No way. And everybody's really ready to sell you the cure. I mean, and that's the thing, right? Everybody's ready to sell you the cure. But, something like Datura, for example, which we could clinically label as like a dissociative hypnotic
Hmm.
sedative. The
Yeah.
question then becomes disassociate from what?
Yes.
Disassociate from your logical inherent wisdom because that's
Hmm.
dangerous as hell, right?
Yes, it is.
Disassociate from ancestral trauma and PTSD, that's a win, right?
Mhm.
Disassociate from some BS narrative, that's a win. So we what's so important is we need to prime ourselves to step into these realms as critical thinkers and not lean upon the storyline, lean upon the plant or the mushroom itself and say, save me, fix me, heal me. Someone told me that you're going to do all of this for me. And
Yeah.
like, if we're not coming in with a certain amount of reverence, protocol, guidance, it can go so many directions, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's the same even of cannabis, all these things, right? All these from the smallest to the
Hmm.
largest. But yeah, Datura is a fascinating one. I mean, it's so deeply tied into dream work, woman's work, birth work, physically and figuratively, right? Uh, and interestingly too, it's a profound respiratory herb, and
Hmm.
when I think of herbs that help us come into proper coherence with our breath, I think about being fully incarnated and being a courageous person, right? So sometimes you have to be that courageous to go into the dark. You have to be
Hmm.
that courageous to step into the storyline and say, here
Yes.
I here I am, ready to do good, ready to face the demons with my radiance,
Yeah. Yeah.
not in attack mode, but in a how do I want to say it? That idea of first I'll pour you tea, let's have a conversation, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Yes. Yes. It's an invitation to be curious and ask questions and
That's right.
receive the answers. And
Yes.
not just receive them, but kind of integrate them because some of the answers can be very discombobulating and very destabilizing, especially when
Indeed.
you're expecting something else and you get a completely like, whoa, whoa, where did that happen? Because there are
Mhm.
consequences to
Of
answers that we
course.
don't expect.
Of course, it changes. It's like in Star Trek when they have the prime directive, they're like, "Oh, you can't, you know, can't I don't know what it is. Leave the ant in the
Yeah.
other world, in the
Yeah.
other planet, because it may change the entire course of
Hmm.
their history. And the same is true for us as when we choose to um, engage in the realm of magic, which, is one way of discussing this. When we
Hmm.
choose to go into the realm of prophecy and seeing and get data and get answers for big
Hmm.
questions or get
Yeah.
bigger questions for questions, we are manipulating the timeline.
Yes.
And when we do that, we need to have full responsibility and a willingness to truly sit with that. And I think the issue so much of how people go about that in the um, whatever in the modern day society is we're all kind of doing it in this sort of like little box by ourselves.
That
We're
sounds
not being
familiar.
we're not being held accountable by our community. We're not being held accountable by our ancestors. We're not being held accountable by anything. We're just like, as long, I'm gonna go do my little trip in the little doctor's office with the right white room and the white walls and the white coats because that's the only place it's legal and allowed, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well,
Yeah.
how the hell do you integrate if you're not crying and barfing and
Hmm. Yeah.
showing all of these things with your
Yeah.
people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Together,
The
uplifting each other,
the
and then dancing
purge.
it off, and then dancing it off together,
Yeah.
and singing it off together. So yeah, there's some interesting facets to it all. But yeah, I love Datura. I know we floated away from that, but
Well, what are some of your other favorite tinctures that seem to
mm,
be uh called on a regular basis by clients and students, if there is such a thing?
mm. There's so many layers to that answer.
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of work that I'm doing lately is liver related, if we want to talk about organ
Okay.
system.
Yes, let's talk about liver because
Mhm.
in Chinese medicine, liver is part of the spring. It's part of the
Yep.
spring element,
Yes.
uh, bursting forth from, being so sequestered and all of that. It's about anger and frustration and
Yep.
the art of saying no in order to in order to facilitate change and fuck this shit,
Hmm.
all of that kind of stuff. And because of our environment and our addictions, it's highly toxified by our environment, by what we drink, by what we eat, by pesticides, by, just all of the toxicity in our environment. And it has to do a lot. It filters waste. It does a lot of things.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, because if we think about the liver as, yes, it's this filter for toxicity, but
Mhm.
really I think of it too as the great metabolizer. It
Yes.
is helping our body decide what stays as food and fruit,
Yes. And
right?
what
As
goes?
minerals, what stays and what goes.
Hmm.
So now back to that conversation about integration. Like, people could go to the weekend ayahuasca retreat and barf their butts off and all of these things, but integration is the
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
So the liver so speaks of this integration of literally what stays, what am I going to absorb and I'm going to build my body and my life force
Yes.
out of?
Yes.
And what goes, right? What are we going to release through our quote
Yes.
unquote waste? And so integration, metabolizing, this is not just a physical thing. This is an emotional thing. This is a spiritual thing that we're doing. And so many people are holding on to so many stories that aren't even their stories, so many beliefs that
Mhm.
aren't even their beliefs. And I say, maybe it's time, maybe it's time to digest some of that, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it's time to digest some of that and separate the shit from the medicine. And
Yeah. Let it go.
right. And the interesting thing is so many liver herbs are bitter, aromatic, right? They have a sort of pungent nature to them. So just by nature of those flavors, those chemical compounds, not only are they supporting liver function in that whole process, but they're stimulating the vagus nerve. They're stimulating this information superhighway of self that's deciding,
Hmm.
am I safe? Am I not safe? Where am I? Who am I? what's going on, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are these very interesting sort of layers to talking about how herbs work or talking about what's happening when we're encouraging the liver to function in a more optimal state. Like, and to take away that compartmentalization, all of a sudden you see all these stacked functions. That's to me the beauty of herbs and mushrooms is in their stacked functions. And that's where
Mhm.
they differ from a sort of synthetic extract that's a pure compound.
Mhm.
And there's a time and a place for everything, right? But
Yeah.
the difference between a pure compound and and fungi is herbs and fungi, they have 200 something chemical compounds in them. So they're doing many things at once. And oftentimes I feel that there are these emergent properties that come from this cascade of impacts that a bitter herb has on the liver, but also on the
Mhm.
vagus nerve, but also on the gut, but also it's fungal. And
Yeah. Yeah.
all of a sudden now,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
the anti-inflammatory stuff too.
all
That's
of that.
huge.
Yeah.
Love it.
So yeah, a lot of sort of liver nervines lately. So calming liver
Hmm.
supportive herbs. And there's many, right? So like Tulsi being a big one, Shazandra being a big one.
Mm.
What I'm seeing what's over front facing on my tincture wall right now. Reishi mushroom, I mean, being a
Mm.
huge one, something that I lean upon a lot for a lot of different people. Um, Interestingly enough, though, I feel like a lot of my work came like up from the underground around the Amanita muscaria mushroom. So a lot of people do come to me with curiosity and questions about that
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well,
that's a
she's so
whole,
pretty. She's so pretty and
that's right.
inviting. It's like, I'm so pretty. Look at me. Put me on a shelf, please.
Well, and it's that dangerous beauty once again, just like the
Indeed.
datura, where
Oh,
it's like
yeah. Femme fatale.
we love a good dangerous beauty out here, but you're talking to
I
two of
love
them
it.
right now, people. But yeah,
That
no,
that is actually an amazing archetype too,
that's
because in my work with really women doing the deep shadow work
mm-mm.
to excavate
Yes.
their the insanity and the rage uh, that is programmed again and again and again and beaten down and being expressed in hatred toward men. uh,
Mm-mm.
the for lack of a better way to put it, the pussifying of men to
Right.
turn them into simps and yes men,
Yeah.
the sort of chivalric male, which is the complete antithesis of an embodied, strong masculine that is conscious,
Mm-mm.
and on the straightforward. Um,
Mm.
so one of the things that comes up is the admitting of many women not just weaponizing their beauty,
Yeah.
but also being guilty of their beauty
Mm.
and also hell-bent on destroying beauty or embodying the complete antithesis of beauty by distorting their
Mm.
appearance either through very unhealthy ways or surgically
Mm.
or whatever, what's
Mm.
self-harm.
Right.
And so that's coming up a lot. And
Mm.
it's really amazing to me how um, the fascination for that particular mushroom
Yes.
comes up in conversation. I didn't notice it for a while, and then I started thinking, wait a minute, why does this come up? Why does this come up? Why does this come up? And so the femme fatale archetype
Mm.
of the woman and weaponizing that in whichever way. I mean, there's a myriad different ways of
Mm.
abusing that archetype, and
That's right.
ultimately the ownership of all the many ways that women use certain tactics, and they
Yep.
don't even know they're doing it because it's part of the mind control of the
That's it.
feminine. It's the mind control of the gynocracy to once again just facilitate the divide and conquer, the divide of the masculine and feminine, the weaponizing of the feminine and the matriarchy, uh, it, to fight the patriarchy and back and forth and back and forth. And it's just fascinating to me the language of nature that is, if you look beyond the surface, it's right there going, hi.
Man,
Um,
don't even get me
oh,
started. It's like,
oh,
don't
yes.
even get me started on this conversation because, so I feel like, the future, I've seen the future is female, the future is,
Hmm.
and then I've seen also the future is fungi.
Yeah,
And I make jokes with people about that. And I'm like, which one? Because black mold's gonna kill you.
indeed, indeed.
Right? So
Yeah.
so when we start throwing out these catchphrases like this, and this is why recently, this was last year, I ended up teaching a class called the mushroom tip. And it was a joke, in a sense, because I was like, okay, I'm going to do an aphrodisiacs class. It's going to be about aphrodisiacs and fungi, but really it's going to be a love poem to the dick. Like it's going to be a
Yeah.
love poem to the phallus. And when we talk about utilizing certain kinds of mushrooms for healing and all of these different things, I think people forget, and same thing with plants and certain parts of the plant, we're eating the sexual organ.
Hmm.
We're consuming, becoming impregnated, penetrated by the sexual organ known as an Amanita muscaria mushroom, known
Hmm.
as a psilocybe mushroom, right?
Yes.
This is
Yes.
literally the phallus coming into the fruiting
Yes.
phallus coming into creation out
Yeah.
of the underworld matrix,
Yes.
other mycelium
Yes.
womb.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
like
a whole communication center happening.
it's a whole thing. And the thing is even thinking about the poetry and the lore of that particular mushroom alone is it has this sort of dual-faced chemistry where
Hmm.
in the wild, uh, animals will eat raw Amanita muscaria, particularly the story being about deer and about bears will eat it raw, male deer's male bear before rutting to become so absolutely courageous and so absolutely sparked because it's like a glutamate receptor kind
Hmm.
of
Right.
stimulating thing that there's this aspect of, and even in some of the like Kanti Siberian lore, it's like men will eat it to have the courage to tell the epic stories of their ancestors, right? This
Hmm.
power, this power, this passion.
Yes.
Ugh. But
Yeah.
then when the mushroom is cooked and simmered, um, it's what's coaxed out is a chemical compound that is very calming and very quote unquote sedating. Um,
Wow.
really what it's doing. It's a GABA thing. So really
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
is it's calming. And this is where for so long I had to really sit with this and think, am I just like a trickster weirdo, or is this how other people receive it? Is when it is in its cooked form, I am calm enough to be a body, a sensual thing, not this sort of like rambling idea sphere,
Hmm. Hmm.
intellectualized.
Yeah.
I've been made to be an intellectualized woman, but really it dropped me into this like, wow, I am a sensual, soft
Wow.
creature. And what
How
does it feel
cool.
like when the mind becomes a wee bit quiet and and feel, I feel that I am. As opposed to I'm told I'm supposed to be mad at the system. I'm told I'm supposed to be
Right.
like trying to do it like guys do it. I'm told I'm
Right.
supposed to
Right.
be
That
the
talking head
CEO,
thing.
like all this.
These are all the things that yeah, I get it.
So
That's
this one,
amazing.
yeah, this one mushroom in particular to me speaks so deeply to both the beauty of the masculine and its power and potency, and the beauty of the feminine and its power and
Hmm.
potency, or
Hmm.
its juiciness and potency. And
Love it.
oh yeah, I could keep going.
Love it. That is so wonderful. I'm looking at the time. We're
Hmm.
at wow. Holy moly. How's that happen? Anyways, if you
Oh
have
yeah.
time, yeah, that
Yeah,
was fast.
yeah, you know.
It's just such a fascinating time.
Mm,
And I can't, I keep repeating the whole divine timing
mm,
of plant medicine, the herbs,
yes.
the as a as a kind of taking over. This is my vision to
Mm,
have the true plants, the true herbs, the true fungi,
mm,
the true elements, including the healing gifts of the rocks and minerals and other things to
mm,
come in and slowly infiltrate and take over big pharma.
mm. I mean, Big Pharma's been
Hold
watching
into
us
it.
the whole time. They've been watching us the whole time,
Hmm.
you know.
Yep, they have.
They've been watching, and there's so many layers to that one. Um, but yeah, the plants have been here, and they will probably be here longer than our version of humanity. And hey, the ultimate interesting thing to me is that we we've come up together. I don't know how to say this properly right now. Um, I'll say it maybe in a story sense, in a short form, is I have always had this affinity for roses and apples and peaches and hawthorn. There's this certain draw and attraction that I've had to these plants. So ever since I was into plants, right? How they taste, how they feel in my body, how they look. And when I went on my ancestral walkabout and went to Eastern Europe to go see walk the land of my predecessors, those were all the plants that I saw there. And I thought to myself, my bones knew to love these things because that's what my great great grandparents
Hmm.
loved,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So as far as the power and potency of plants and plant medicine and plant intelligence, there's an inherent code that's programmed in our makeup to have an affinity for and love these things because
Hmm.
they're why we're here.
Yeah.
They're what kept our ancestors healthy and
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So now the interesting thing is recognizing that there's like any good thing, there's the land itself, there's having a relationship with the elements that we are and that the land is. And there's the corporate infiltration of herbalism and psychedelics. And we just have to know who we are, know where we are, and decide where we want to put ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah,
That's so
they're here for
beautiful.
us.
Hmm.
And that's the thing, I think ultimately it's not finding the super herb or the super cure, but it's
Yeah.
developing relationships with the elements themselves,
Hmm. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Because I think the totality of all of that, the collaboration, is
Mm,
what creates the true healing and the
mm,
true restoration
that's it.
of our really original template.
That's it. It's serious soul retrieval stuff. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Calling in the parts of ourselves, being okay with our bitter, being okay with our sweet, being okay with our pungent, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's
All balanced out,
mm,
you know.
mm, mm,
So, what are you up to these days? What's on the horizon? What are you in the middle of? Uh,
mm. I've been quiet to talk about it, but I am writing a book. So I don't
Yay!
want to say too much until I
Okay.
get more on the page, but yeah,
Awesome. I
book
look
is
forward to that.
book is slowly but surely coming to life. And then just yeah, setting my plans up for a year of teaching. I've been kind of in winter hibernation, but just kind of cooking up some good uh talks, some good curriculum, to share. Because I'm always trying to do something new. I'm not trying to be that same person that teaches the same
Hmm.
thing over and over
Hmm.
and over forever.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, just building out some new curriculum for the year, writing a lot, and I've just been doing a heck of a lot of client work lately, like one-on-ones.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Beautiful,
that's what's cooking
beautiful.
over here at the moment.
Yeah,
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I have had an absolutely fabulous time with our talk and catching up. I want to have you again,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking maybe if you're open and
Hmm.
you have the time and the energy, uh, to have you as a regular, um,
Hmm.
just in terms of really putting on the map the importance of engaging with plants. I think that's an
Hmm.
important thing. I know that for myself, I I benefit so much
Hmm.
from nature's gifts and treats. I
Yes.
think it is, and I've been like revisioning what it is that I'm doing and really wanting to bring in some of
Hmm.
my favorite people who are doing such amazing work in these very, very important specialized platforms.
Hmm.
Hopefully that sounds tasty and fun.
Heck
Because
yeah, it does.
I think it's important to
Mm,
the cross-pollinization, especially
that's it.
in the work that I am doing,
Yes.
where as I'm winding down, um, and winding down not just my client work, but really wanting to bring in powerhouses such as yourself to help the collective along and to really share in the knowledge, the wisdom, resources, the fun,
Mm,
um, and the curiosity of the beauty and the landscape that we live that really has everything within our reach to
that's
help
it.
facilitate, the renewal, the realignment of really who and what we truly are and what we're all
Yes.
about. You know?
Yes. I mean, and this is the thing, when people want to throw out buzzwords like sovereignty, which I know we saw so much of that coming up in the last few years, like I'm
Oh my
sovereign. And I'm
God,
like,
it's so overdone. I don't want to hear it.
and I'm like, from some
Yeah.
sovereign women speaking here now, like that's to me
Mhm.
the whole thing about engaging with the beauty and intelligence of the organic realm is
Yes.
that
Yes.
there's a collective sovereignty that is
Hmm.
available to us at all
Yes.
times.
Yeah.
Like no, never fear about the toilet paper shortage, never fear about an elderberry shortage.
Yeah.
Like
Or the
it,
egg shortage. That's just the,
it's
it's like, holy moly. I saw somebody with like literally, I couldn't believe I'm like thinking, do you even have a where would you put it? Like, I don't even understand it. I mean, it was beyond need. But yeah, the
yeah,
toilet paper wars.
toilet paper. I mean, and this is where, sometimes people are like, well, we didn't even talk about herbs the whole time. Like, why you just it takes you've been in some of my classes where it's like
Hmm.
it takes me
Yeah,
2 hours to even get to talking about the herbs.
yeah,
And my style is it's about a way of thinking, and it's about
indeed.
recontextualizing our pathways to mimic the organic intelligence pathways because that's who we are
Brilliant.
at the core. And if we can start thinking that way, then we are unstoppable. You want to talk about
Hmm.
sovereignty, then we are unstoppable. If
Yes,
oh, I
yes.
understand that a bitter tasting herb is going to make my liver do something. So why don't I go out and utilize the beautiful scientific instrument of my body to taste for bitter? Like
Hmm.
it's about literally just changing how
Yes,
we think and engage
yes.
rather than like
Yeah,
memifying and productifying the
yes.
thing, the thing.
The catchphrases where, Sovereignty is one of those catchphrases, and it is not understood. I mean, I have people
Mm.
talking about it, and I'm just looking at them like, oh dear God, I'm just gonna let you talk. And, because there is a certain appeal,
Of
and
course.
and hopefully, my hope is that people will see right through the sort of hijacking that pop culture does.
That's it.
The buzzword, the certain buzzword,
That's it.
sovereignty. What's another one? Um, whatever. I mean, I
Oh,
can't
there's a
think
plenty,
of
yeah.
them.
Yeah. I mean, and that's where I say, whether we're looking at herbs or we're looking at people to find our kin, it's like, don't look for the freaking labels and the look,
Yes.
feel for the quality.
Hmm.
We are wild and free. I am so absolutely free, in my mind and my heart, that to me is true sovereignty.
Yes.
I feel so absolutely wild and free in many senses, right? There's work to be done, but
Hmm. Yes.
we're
Indeed.
but anyway, yeah, I would love to continue talking with you on the screen and off the screen.
Yes.
I cherish you as a real deal,
I
real deal
I
family
cherish you
member.
as
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
I was talking about how my youngest stepson remembers your tea ceremony from
Sheesh.
2007. It's like, how awesome is that to have that kind of impact? I think he was like 4 or 5, you know, is gonna be 22 this year. It's quite amazing. I mean, when you think about it, the impact that something so simple has on a little wee being, and it's memorable. Love it. Love it, love it, love
That's
it.
we remember what we taste, we remember
Hmm.
what we smell. Our senses are powerful gateways
Yes.
to imprinting.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, is there anything that you would like to add as we close our time together?
Oh gosh, just grateful to have a platform as a freewheeling, never institutionalized, gal, or associated with an institution or institution.
Yes.
Just thank you for the platform to be freewheeling and share. And if anybody's curious about what the heck am I actually up to, they can find me on the interwebs. My webpage is blacksagebotanicals.org. I also am most active on Instagram as far as social media goes. I have a Patreon page too. But I would encourage folks to please feel free to check out my online curriculum about
It's got
history
a
and
beautiful
history and
curriculum, kids.
plants.
We'll have all of the Ash's information in the show notes below.
You.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful blessing you are, my love. I'm so thrilled. Yay!
Thank
And
you.
we will do this again.
Yeah.
So, anyways, kids, thank you so much, Ash. Thank you all for joining in and partaking. And so, until next time, my loves, here is to love, truth, and beauty. Mwah! Bye bye for now, love bugs.